Hello my lovelies, this is Past Cole, reading for you into the future. And on today's fanfiction forecast for Podficking is Not Cut Out for Heroics, chapter 66 to 70. Wow, only 2 more videos to go. With this one, of course. And then it will be the first completed series, we started this channel with this fic, and it's gonna be finished soon. Well, if it isn't interesting or a milestone, I'm not sure. I'm just really excited. So, buckle up and get ready for this. Just a little remark before we start. My cat Suna is currently extra cuddly and will most likely speak into the recording throughout this hour and a half. Anyway, Not Cut Out for Heroics, a Boku no Hero fanfiction written by Ended Flames on AO3. Read by Cole. Chapter 66, Forest Fire. The next day of training went without a hitch, which only led Izuku to become more paranoid, as all of Class 1A and B stood together in a clearing facing a forest path that led off into the darkness. "Izuku, are you alright?" Shoto asked, coming to stand next to him as Pixie Bob explained the rules of the games they'd be playing. Izuku wrung his hands nervously. You know, you don't need to be scared. You know you don't need to be scared of the game, right? It's not that, Izuku sighed, letting his hands drop to his sides. I've just got a weird feeling. Something's not right? I feel it too. Surprisingly, Momo appeared at his other side, looking unsettled. I feel as though something's going to go wrong, but regardless, I came over because Aizawa was looking for you. Todoroki, you and Shinzo have remedial lessons. Oh. Shoto sighed, turning to head off. Well, good luck in the game then, Izuku. See you later. Good luck in your lessons, Shoto. Izuku called back before returning his attention to the front. 1B were making their way into the forest together and 1A were drawing lots to decide their partners. Izuku quickly headed up to the front and ended up picking a strip with a number 9, which, due to their numbers, meant that he didn't have a partner. Just his luck. Are you okay with going in on your own, Midoriya? You seem nervous, Mendeley asked as the first pair, Tokoyami and Shochi, headed into the forest together. Izuku nodded with a sigh. It'll be fine, Izuku said, not turning to look at the woman, instead staring at the retreating backs of his classmates. I just have a weird feeling, that's all. I see, she smiled. Good luck then. Next pair! Lightning Boy and Rock Boy! You two are up next. Come and get ready! Pixie Bob called. Kirishima grinned and headed over, Kaminari clinging to him unhelpfully. Around 10 minutes later, not long after Uraraka and Tsuyu had entered the forest, Izuku started smelling smoke. Fire was something he was intimately familiar with. He knew the smell like the back of his hand. He also knew that Shoto wasn't here, and no one in 1B had a fire quirk. It was possible that Kaminari's electricity had gone out of control and started a fire. but that seemed unlikely from just a scare. Mandalay? Izuku got her attention. Can you smell fire? The woman looked confused for a second before turning her nose to the air and taking a sniff. Her face scrunched up. Yes, I do. Pixie Bob? Is there supposed to be smoke? Mina asked, pointing to the sky with thick black smoke, where thick black smoke was already gathering. Mandalay swore under her breath. Pixie Bob! Zero cried as the woman was surrounded in a glowing aura and flung across the clearing, colliding with a large metal pole held by a broad-shouldered woman. Izuku's eyes widened as a man with a lizard quirk followed her onto the metal resting just over her skull. Villains! Mandalay whispered. Tiger was already running to interfere. This is bad. Izuku looked around at the panicking students before Mandalay put a hand to her head, activating her quirk. Everyone! She cried. 2 villains attacked us. It is possible that there are more coming. Everyone return to camp immediately. We're regrouping. Do not engage any enemies. All right. The hero turned to the assembled group. Tiger and I will handle things here. We'll need to trust Ragdoll to look after those in the forest. The rest of you get back to camp. Class rep, you're in charge. Go, quickly! Most of the class turned to head down to the path back to camp, but Izuku continued to hover by Mandalay's side, remembering one important detail everyone seems to have forgotten. Midoriya! Ida called. Come on! I'll catch up! Izuku called back, urging them to go with a look. After a hesitant second, Ida nodded and turned to guide the group back. Mandalay! Where's Kota? The woman faltered, glancing around. He wanders off so much. I have no idea where he goes. He could be in danger right now. I know where he is. I followed him yesterday, Izuku explained quickly. Can you get Aizawa to go? He'll be best to deal with any threat if there is one. I can let him know. Give me the directions and get back to camp, okay? She offered him a tense smile and Izuku nodded, mentally planning to do the opposite as he rattled off the directions to the path he'd followed the night before. Thank you, Midoriya, now go! She cried as Izuku ran off, in the complete opposite direction he was supposed to go. Mandalay was too focused on relaying the message to Aizawa to notice that he'd ran through the finish point of the track and headed into the forest. Shoto didn't fully understand what was going on. All he did know was that their teacher had just bolted from the building after they'd been told their classes were being attacked by villains, and that he, Hitoshi, and Monoma were all not happy about being stuck here. You heard, Mandalay! Hitoshi yelled at Flood, who obviously wasn't budging. There are villains attacking our classmates. We need to help, not hide here. I hate to admit that someone from 1A is right, sir. Monoma scowled. But they're all in trouble if we're doing nothing. Just as he ended his sentence, the door to the room slammed open and 6 1A students stumbled inside, out of breath and a little frantic. Mina and Zero flopped into chairs, trying to regain a normal breathing pace. Ida and Sato immediately joined Hitoshi and Monoma in trying to convince Flood to let them go. Shoto wondered why they didn't just split off and not come here. They must have run into Aizawa. Finally, Koda sat down quietly, sharing soft whispers with a spider that had found a home under the desk, and Ochio hovered awkwardly, as if he didn't know what to do with himself. Shoto knew what that felt like.
What do you think you're doing?
Shota's tone was cold as he activated his quirk just in time to save the small child from a punch that surely meant grave injuries if not certain death. The man stumbled at the sudden loss of strength but quickly regained his composure.
Trying to kill a child? I'll play with you later.
I'll play with you later. You'll get your turn, scrawny hero. Don't worry. Just let me deal with this pest first. The villain, Shota, recognized him from a few news stories as Muscular, very dangerous but basically nothing with without his quirk.
Kota, what are you doing out here?
Shota looked past the villain at the kid, an expression of pure fear on his face.
I know you heard Mandalay. Return to camp.
But what about you? The boy cried, tears in his eyes. You'll die!
I won't. Don't worry about me, kid. Just go.
Shota yelled, his eyes sore from the need to blink. Finally, it was impossible to keep them open, and in a matter of seconds he was flung against the cliff wall with a superpowered punch to the stomach. Shota blinked a few times to chase off the drowsy feeling that came with a knock to the head, and resisted the urge to throw up as he stood back up, readying his scarf as he activated his quirk once again. When the guy deflated, Shota wasted no time wrapping him up in the scarf, dragging him closer. Unfortunately, Muscular was still strong even without his quirk, and Shota wasn't prepared for the uppercut to his jaw, having enough force to send him flying. Kota screamed from somewhere nearby as Shota picked himself up from the floor, cringing a little at the possibility of a broken jaw. Shota repeated the same move again, but this time expected the counterattack, binding the man's arm so that he couldn't punch and dodging the kick that was sent his way, just to chop the pressure point in his neck and knock him out hard. Hopefully it would last long enough for the backup to arrive. As for the next issue he had to deal with, Shota turned to this kid who was still standing stiff as a board with wide eyes and tears spilling down his cheek, staring at the unconscious villain. Shota tried to say something, only for a throbbing pain in his jaw to make his presence known. He settled for a grunt, drawing Kota's attention.
Get on my back.
Shota forced the words out through the pain.
We need to go back to camp.
But you're injured! Kota cried, pointing at his face. The kid was right, of course. His jaw was at least fractured, and he'd taken a hit to the back of his head, too, not to mention the punch to the stomach. He was just a little winded. He wouldn't show it, though.
Doesn't matter.
Shota grunted out.
Come on.
Kota did as he was told, clutching onto the collar of Shota's hero costume. His face was buried in Shota's shoulder, and the hero could feel a wet patch growing as he ran. He didn't comment. Thank you, Kota whispered after a few minutes of running in silence. For saving me, and I'm sorry for treating your class like shit.
Shota couldn't help but snort. Language, kid.
Before you got there, when he was going to attack me, he said I wasn't on the list, then asked me if I knew where Izuku Midoriya was. I said I didn't know, and then, well, you showed up. Kota rambled, clutching onto the fabric of Shota's hero costume tighter.
Thanks, kid.
Shota nodded.
Change of plans. You think you can tell that to Mandalay when we get there?
Yes. Kota nodded against his shoulder, sounding determined. The cap building was in sight, but Shota veered off to another path at the last minute, heading for the clearing. Everyone in Class A and Class B! In the name of Pro Hero in Eraserhead, you are granted permission to engage in combat. I repeat, use your training. You may fight these villains. Listen, we've also discovered that one of the villains' targets is Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, if you haven't already, please return to camp. Try not to engage in combat and stick to a group. Everyone should be on guard. There could be other targets we are not aware of. Shoto looked up at the ceiling as if it would give him answers. His best friend was out there somewhere being targeted by villains and in danger, while Shoto and Hitoshi and the others were all stuck here, safe and protected and unable to help. All they could do was sit and hope that Izuku was okay. It wasn't fair. Shota rushed back towards camp as soon as he relayed their message. Kota saved him from a fire blast with a water blast of his own, and allowed Aizawa to take down the fire user who dissolved into a puddle of goop, before rushing into the building and returning to the classroom where everyone was trying to remain safe. He just hoped Midoriya would be able to make it back to camp safely. Kirishima dove in front of Kaminari to protect him from the bladed teeth this crazy villain was shooting everywhere. His skin was beginning to get softer with every hit, and some of the sharper blades even managed to leave scratches and cuts in their wake. He hoped someone would come for them soon. Ochako was flung out of the way of the crazy knife-wielding girl by Tsuyu, whose tongue was cut instead. Tsuyu yelled for Ochako to run as she was pinned to a tree by her hair, and the villain got closer, brandishing a knife and fawning over a nickname. Ochako couldn't stand by her and let her friend get hurt. She got the girl's attention and used the martial arts she'd learned at her internship to pin her against the ground, saving her friend. Shoji tackled the green-haired boy from the side, wrapping him up in his arms to keep him protected as they rolled through the foliage, narrowly missing the attack Dark Shadow had sent the smaller boy's way. He released Midoriya and then tried to persuade him to return to camp. He already knew it was pointless. Izuku had heard Mandalay's message. He knew he was a target, but he still couldn't help the urge to save his friends. He listened as Shoji explained what had happened and his plan to lure Dark Shadow back towards the light of camp. Izuku came up with a better one where he could keep saving people. He wouldn't let anyone die tonight. Chapter 67. Lost in the Forest. Izuku clutched Shochi's shoulder as they ran. Izuku had ended up riding on Shochi's back to make it easier to execute their plan. Jochi stumbled as Dark Shadow brought down a tree in an effort to make chase. We just need to get to Kaminari, Izuku said, reassuring himself as much as he was reassuring Jochi. When the next pair came into sight, though, it was a pretty sorry one. Ichigo was bleeding, but still trying to help shield Kaminari with his quirk from the villain who was bearing down on them. Kaminari! Izuku cried. We need light! The boy in question stared wide-eyed at Dark Shadow as Shochi skidded to a stop next to them. Izuku slid from his back and helped the boy up. Wait! Ichigo said, Look! Looking to where he was pointing, the others could see the thief villain was now attacking Dark Shadow, who was hitting back and winning! The fight ended quickly. The others turned to Kaminari, who looked terrified. Remember the sports festival, Kaminari! Izuku appeared by his side. You beat Tokoyami then! You surrounded yourself in electricity and Dark Shadow was scared of the light. You just have to do that again, okay? We believe in you! Yeah, man! You totally got this! Ichigo hyped him up. Shochi nodded definitely and Kaminari looked slightly more nervous. I don't know if I can produce enough electricity to counter him. You have to try, Izuku told him. Do it now or we might all get hurt. Kaminari tried, running forward as he gathered electricity around his body. Sparks of lightning bouncing off of his body and reaching for the surrounding rocks and ground. The glow grew brighter as the voltage increased. Izuku could feel the static in the air growing. He could feel his hair starting to stand on end, and he could only watch Dark Shadow start to shrink as Kaminari's electricity grew brighter until he retreated fully and Tokoyami was kneeling on the floor. Ichigo went straight to Kaminari, making sure he wouldn't wander off in the short-circuit state he was now in, while Izuku and Shochi helped Tokoyami to his feet. Izuku! Shouldn't you be back at the camp right now? Ichigo asked him after Tokoyami had apologized for allowing Dark Shadow to rampage. Izuku and the others had been quick to console him. We all heard the announcement earlier. It's not safe for you to be out here. I know, but I was already on my way before I heard, and well, now I'm here, so I can't really go. We should get you and Kaminari back to camp. Ichigo interrupted. Come on, let's go. If we go through the clearing, it's likely we'll bring unwanted attention from those on the side of darkness, Tokoyami said, and Shochi nodded. It will be quicker to go through the forest, Shochi told them. They're right, Izuku nodded. But Tokoyami, are you going to be okay with going through the forest with Dark Shadow? I shall be fine, though I appreciate your concern. Tokoyami brushed off his shirt. We should prioritize yours and Kaminari's safety now. The 5 of them headed into the woods. Shochi carried Kaminari on his back so they wouldn't need to worry about him wandering off, while Ichigo linked arms with Izuku so he couldn't wander off either. They made it through the woods without a problem, except Izuku's pricking feeling that they were being watched that had been feeling all evening. Guys, I hate to be the one to say this. Ichigo, the head of their group, stopped suddenly in the middle of a small clearing. But that's a wall of fire! There wasn't a wall of fire in the direction we were going. So what you're saying is,
We're lost. Yeah.
Ichigo nodded.
And trapped within this cage of light.
Tokoyami observed as the fire started spreading through the trees around them.
Izuku, a bright idea would be good right now.
Ichigo looked over to his friend, who shrugged. I guess we could go back the way we came? Izuku suggested, backing up. The only warning he had were his classmate's eyes widening before he bumped into someone. A hot, uncomfortably at best, painful at worst, hand came up to his neck. Suddenly this wasn't just a bad situation, it was a terrible situation. The villains had a hostage.
Izuku!
Ichigo yelped, stepping forward. The villain gripped Izuku's throat. Izuku's throat tighter at the movement, and Izuku couldn't help the pained gasp that escaped him at having his airways unceremoniously closed.
No one here moves, or I'll burn his pretty little neck.
The villain, now identified, most likely male. Izuku glanced down at his arm, which looked to be heavily scarred. Wait, said.
That goes for you too, scrub. Scrub?
Izuku couldn't help the indignant cry at the odd nickname. The villain gave a huff which could easily be interpreted as a laughter.
Yeah, 'cause of you look like a weird bush,
the villain said with a smirk, ruffling his hair with his other hand. Izuku squawked awkwardly.
Now you're gonna come with me, or...
Hey, I don't know what you're doing, making demands, villains, but you better let our friends go.
Ichigo interrupted. Izuku managed to suppress a sigh. When this was over, he'd asked Aizawa to give a lesson on hostage situations. If he survived, that is.
You really don't get it, do you?
The villain sighed. Good. At least this guy would say something instead of murdering him.
This is a hostage situation. You retaliate, I kill him. Are you gonna prioritize me over a kid's life?
Ichigo's eyes widened, finally realizing the extent of the situation and stepping back.
What do you want then?
I've got what I want,
the guy said, reaching up with his spare hand to press a button in his earpiece.
I have the target. A warp would be pretty fucking handy. Would be pretty fucking handy right now. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's probably killed someone by now. Nomu, return.
Izuku!
Ichigo cried as the sound of a portal opening behind them reached Izuku's ears. Stop! I'll be alright, Ichigo. Izuku smiled. Just make sure everyone else is alright.
Shut it, kid.
The villain hissed as the hand on his neck reached burning temperatures, or I'll incinerate them. Izuku could only watch in horror as the portal swallowed him up. Ichigo screamed and ran forward, trying to grab anything. Izuku's hand, the villain's jacket, anything he could grab to pull his friend back through the portal. But he couldn't grab anything, and the portal was closed before he could try again. The group was left to stare in shock at the space where their friend had stood.
Midoriya was taken.
Shochi said sadly.
He was taken and we could do nothing. It hurts to know we have let our companion fall into their hands.
Tokoyami nodded.
But we should honor his wishes and find our comrades. You're You're right. Ichigo sighed. You're right. Let's go.
What was that scream? Ochako asked quietly, looking out in the direction of the firewall as she clung to Tsuyu. The crazy girl had taken a lot of her blood before running off. She felt a little woozy. Do you think? Our classmates are strong, Kero. Tsuyu reassured her. They'll be okay. We should return to camp, Ochako mumbled. Sawa-sensei's probably worried. You're right. Can you walk? Tsuyu asked, tilting her head as she looked at her friend. Ochako nodded and tried to steady herself, only to slump forward dangerously. Tsuyu caught her with minimal effort and wrapped one of Ochako's arms around her shoulders. I'll support you, Kero. Come on. The two girls walked in silence, save the occasional reminder from Tsuyu not to let herself pass out. After what felt like hours, they made it back to the lodge, where emergency services were gathering. Immediately, Tsuyu passed Ochako to the paramedics, explaining the situation, then allowing herself to be checked over. I should find Aizawa-sensei, Tsuyu told the medic as he finished checking her over. I need to let him know we're safe, Kero. The medic nodded, letting her go while he went to help his partner get Ochako into the waiting ambulances. Tsuyu looked around, hoping to spot her teacher.
Who's still missing, Eraser? Flat.
Fuck. No. Who's still missing, Eraser? Flat? Mandalay checked back up with him as she helped him recover with the recovery effort.
Aoyama, Shiro, and Hagakure haven't returned. Awase's report says they're most likely together.
Aizawa reported, rubbing a hand across his forehead.
Kirishima, Kaminari, Tokoyami, and Chochi haven't gotten back either, and of course, Midoriya ran off. Most of 1B were knocked out by the gas. Almost everyone is back, but we're still missing Kosai and a few others.
Flood quickly reported,
we're trying to get those who aren't injured inside of the for a head count to be sure now. And we're sure all the villains are gone.
Tiger interjected.
The backup that was called in for still sweeping the area, but we're pretty sure they all left on a signal, which means
they probably completed their mission. Mandalay finished grimly.
Shoto was getting more and more worried with every new student who arrived in their classroom. He knew realistically that he should be grateful for his classmates to be okay, but he couldn't help but worry about his friends. No one who came in had seen Izuku, nor Ichigo, or Tokoyami. He has Yaoyorozu's whereabouts, but that didn't help much when she was with the paramedics for a bad head injury, and the newest member of their group, Hagakure, was missing too. The only one who he had was Hitoshi, who seemed equally as worried. All right, everyone, listen up. Mandalay got their attention through her telepathy. We've swept the area and found that there are no remaining villains. So if you're hiding or stuck somewhere, it's now safe to return. We will be doing a head count shortly. Most of their classmates sagged in relief. That announcement meant almost everyone must be back by now, and if they weren't, they'd be back soon. Shoto couldn't help still feeling on edge though, not with Izuku still potentially missing. In the next 5 minutes, Tokoyami joined their group,
looking miserable. He immediately beelined for Shoto and Hitoshi.
Hey, Tokoyami.
Hitoshi waved half-heartedly.
Any news? We've been stuck here this entire time.
Their classmate looked hesitant for a moment before sighing and recounting the events that led to Izuku's kidnapping. Shoto and Hitoshi stared in horror as Tokoyami told them about the villains and how Izuku was held hostage until he was dragged into a portal. They didn't have a chance to react now though, because Aizawa came through the door. Shoto shoved down his rising horror to listen. Something was wrong with Shoto. Admittedly, Hitoshi knew he wasn't doing much better. How could he when he'd found out only an hour ago that his first and best friend had been taken by villains and he could do nothing about it? Most of the students who weren't injured had already been picked up from the hospital they'd been transported to by their parents or guardians. Those injured or unconscious were being looked after, and the rest of them were left to wait. Present Mike had been one of the first other teachers to arrive. Aizawa was being treated for his own injuries, but his husband, after checking up on him, of course, had offered to bring both Hitoshi and Shoto home. Hitoshi had been about to agree, just wanting to curl up in his bed and try to forget about all of this for a few hours, when Shoto had sat on one of the benches in the waiting room and adamantly refused to move. Even when Mike tried to bribe him with cookies, Shoto had been quick to turn up his nose. Worse still was that Shoto hadn't said so much as a word since Tokoyami had told them what happened. Hitoshi knew that Shoto was a quiet person in general, but he'd been getting to know the boy since before the sports festival, and he knew that Shoto was quiet, but he'd never been totally silent, especially since he's gotten involved with Ryoku. But now he wouldn't say anything. Yamada had decided to head back to Aizawa's room after a while of trying to persuade Shoto to talk, believing that leaving them alone might help. Hitoshi had no idea whether it would or not, but hey, at least he could try his hand.
Hey, Shoto?
Hitoshi sighed because Izuku would know what to do if he were here. Which he's not, so fuck that!
Are you... Okay, no, that's a stupid question. Obviously, you're not okay. What's going on? Why won't you talk to us?
Shoto stared at the ground with unwavering eyes for a moment before sighing and letting out a quiet murmur.
Don't want to talk right now. That's it. You sure? Because I'm here for you if you need me, and so is Yamada, and I bet Dad would love to hear from you too. I know I'm not the best at it, but
I don't want to talk about it, Shoto repeated, clenching his fists. Okay, so just drop it. Hitoshi did drop it, for all of 5 minutes, until the silence became unbearable.
You know I'm upset too, right? He's my friend as well, and he's been kidnapped and I couldn't do anything about it. And I know it's hard for you too, so please, just...
I already said I don't want to talk about it. Shoto stood up, abruptly cutting off his sentence. If you want to vent your feelings, you should talk to someone else. With those parting words, Shoto stormed off, down a corridor that led to who knows where. Hitoshi slumped back into his seat, defeated, tired, and feeling more alone than ever. Chapter 68 Villains and Plots. Izuku came to his senses slowly, He didn't remember being knocked out, nor did he feel any pain, meaning they must have done it with some kind of drug, rather than a blow to the head. The first sensation to come back to him was a tingling in his fingers, before he was able to feel around him. He quickly found his hands were tied behind his back to the chair, as were his ankles. His head was hanging down with his chin to his chest. It was uncomfortable, but he wouldn't dare move in case he alerted the villains that he was awake. The chair itself was surprisingly comfortable, the kind of chair you may expect at a cheap restaurant with a cushion and everything. The room was warm but not uncomfortably warm and smelled vaguely like tea and alcohol. Blinking his eyes open, Izuku glanced around the room. He was in through his bangs. It was a bar at first glance, which explained the alcohol smell. The space was dingy and looked abandoned yet spotless, as though someone had cleaned recently. Behind the bar, absent-mindedly cleaning a glass, stood a man made of mist. Otherwise, there was no one there. Izuku brought his attention back to the man who hadn't seemed to notice him yet. Silently, Izuku attempted to identify the man. He remembered being pulled into a dark portal. Maybe that was this guy's quirk? The mist was the right color, and wasn't there a mist guy at the USJ who made portals? Probably the same person. Portal quirks were rare after all, and the portal quirk at the USJ seemed pretty unique. When his friends had told him about it, he'd wanted to analyze it more, but couldn't find any information. It took a moment for Izuku to realize the man was now staring right at him, and clamped his mouth shut. For fuck's sake, they couldn't have gagged him or something. Stupid muttering habit. Izuku said finally, looking up. This is awkward. Where is everyone? The mist man shrugged, sounding a little exasperated in his response.
Tomura is playing video games upstairs and the others are out doing whatever it is they do. Would you like some tea?
Oh, I would, but my hands are kinda tied right now. Izuku shrugged back, raising an eyebrow. Hey, aren't I supposed to be a hostage? Shouldn't you guys be torturing me or something? Why are you offering me tea?
Would you rather we torture you?
The man asked. Izuku was getting slightly annoyed, but with being unable to tell facial expressions from the misty yellow eyes. No thanks. Izuku tilted his head awkwardly. Anyways, you have a name, Mist Man?
Kurogiri.
The Mist Man responded. Izuku Midoriya, nice to meet you. Izuku smiled. Kurogiri didn't say anything else, just turned back to his glasses with a muttered, "What the hell?" Izuku couldn't tell how long it was until someone else arrived at the bar. The arrivals were a blonde girl who Izuku didn't recognize and a taller man who he did. Dabi, the relatively new villain, mostly known for arson, and the person who'd helped him with the Endeavor ID video. Izuku locked eyes with him immediately. Dabi's bright turquoise eyes meeting his. Just a look was enough to confirm a theory he'd had for a while. Hi, Toya! Izuku nodded. Hey, other person. I'm Himiko Toga! You can call me Himiko! The girl presented herself happily, while Dabi froze beside her. Can I stab you?
Hi, Himiko. Izuku replied politely. I'm Izuku Midoriya and I'd rather you didn't. Maybe later. Anyways, you good there, Dabi? What the fuck did you just call me?
The man snapped back to his senses immediately, rounding on Izuku with a scowl, pulling on the staples in his skin. Dobby? Izuku tilted his head innocently. That's your code name, right? Himiko skipped over to stand beside him, pulling out a knife and fiddling with it. He called you Toya! Wait, isn't that the name of the Todoroki kid who died? She tilted her head, putting a finger to her chin. Why'd he call you that? Anyway, can I call you Izuku? And please let me stab you? You look so pretty covered in blood, and I bet it tastes so good too. Izuku tried to lean away. We can come back to that later. Dobby?
You...
Dobby seemed to be having a mental breakdown. How the fuck? Multiple reasons. Izuku smiled. First, you had all that information about Toya that not even Rei and Shoto could give. You basically told us that you lived with Shigaraki and Kurogiri. You have the same quirk as Toya and your eyes are just like Shoto's left. Your scars are obviously burns, and Toya apparently burned to death. There's probably more. Who's your source, by the way? Oh, you've been caught! Himiko giggled. I didn't know you were a Todoroki. That's so cool! Wait, back up. That means you're... Yep, don't tell anyone, please. Izuku smiled sweetly. And I won't tell anyone you're Toya. Dobby looked uneasy before glancing at Himiko and Kurogiri. The girl was practically bouncing on her feet, and Kurogiri was faking indifference, while obviously eavesdropping. Himiko, if you don't tell anyone either, I'll talk to you about the blood thing later. Izuku offered her, and she lit up like a Christmas tree. Really, you will? She grinned, the smile stretching far enough to reveal her fangs. Part of her quirk, Izuku assumed. As long as you don't tell anyone about this. Izuku nodded, and Himiko grinned wider than Izuku thought possible, and nodded frantically. Kurogiri! I know you're listening to us. Please don't tell anyone either. The Mistman looked over to them. Izuku suspected he'd be raising an eyebrow, as he simply said, I didn't hear anything. Shoto didn't know where he was going when he ran off. He knew it was rude of him to leave Hitoshi like he did. It was rude of him to snap at his friend when he was just trying to help. Shoto knew that. But still, he didn't want to talk right now. His brain was so muddled. He couldn't come up with words to express his feelings, and trying only made it worse. It wasn't like he didn't want to talk about it. He just couldn't describe the storm of feelings in his chest, all fighting to be let out at once, and it made him want to scream in frustration. With his fists clenched at his sides, Shoto kept walking through the crisp halls of the hospital. The polished floors made his shoes squeak with every step, and the smell of antiseptic and cleaning products almost overwhelmed his senses. The fluorescent lights in the ceiling burned the back of his eyes, and the workers rushing past with trolleys of equipment made him want to run even more. Shoto found that all he wanted was a quiet space where he could sort through his thoughts in peace. Eventually, Shoto found himself outside Aizawa's room. He wasn't sure why his feet had brought him here, but it was as good a place as any. The lights were off inside, but the blinds over the windows were open, letting in the early morning light. They'd really been here that long? Hisashi wasn't here. Shoto vaguely remembered him saying something about going home. He'd been too occupied with his swirling thoughts to pay attention. Aizawa laid in the hospital bed, bandages wrapped around his head and jaw. Shoto couldn't tell whether he was asleep or not. Silently, Shoto slipped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click before moving, with light steps so he wouldn't make noise, to the visitor's chair that sat empty by his bed. Sitting down on the chair, Shoto pulled his knees up to his chest, wrapping his arms around his legs and resting his chin on his knees, setting to stare off into space. There was movement next to him, but Shoto's brain didn't register it as he continued to stare at the wheel on a trolley set in the corner by the room. In his head, he picked out every detail on the wheel, trying to calm his racing thoughts, and jerked sideways and almost fell out of the chair when a hand touched his arm.
Hey, problem child.
His teacher's voice was a little raspy when he spoke, seemingly struggling with the bandages. Shoto's head snapped to his side, his eyes meeting Aizawa's. His teacher's gaze was filled with concern. He was worried about him. Shoto's brain supplied, and suddenly he felt like a child, small and vulnerable, in front of his teacher.
Are you okay?
Shoto couldn't help it when a tear rolled down his right cheek, and then couldn't stop it when Aizawa's hand touched his arm again and he broke. Hitoshi paced back and forth, in front of the bench he and Shoto had been sitting on. Back and forth. Again and again. He shouldn't have pushed his friend like that. It was obvious that Shoto had wanted to talk. Back and forth. Hitoshi should have understood. Should have known how his friend was feeling. Back and forth. He'd been there before, after all, before Shota and Hitsashi had adopted him, and for a good amount of time afterwards too. Back and forth. Running a frustrated hand through his already messy hair, Hitoshi sat back down on the bench only to stand up again and keep pacing. He wanted to go and find Shoto and apologize, but he knew it wouldn't help right now. Back and forth. His friend wanted to be alone. Hitoshi would just make everything worse. Back and forth. He wanted to vent his frustration, wanted to complain, but he would feel bad when everyone was in the same situation. Back and forth. He wanted a cup of coffee, but he didn't want to leave the hospital in case Shoto came back or something happened. Back and forth and...
Hey man, how are you holding up?
Hitoshi's head snapped up at the familiar voice of his friend. Ichigo's hair wasn't gelled up like it usually was, and his signature smile was missing from his face. But the appearance of his friend was a welcome one.
Not great, Hitoshi admitted with a heavy sigh. I upset Shoto. I just wish we could do something, you know. Our friend was talking. I was stuck at the lodge sitting on my ass and I couldn't help, and I'm sorry. I know it's probably even harder for you and just...
No, it's okay.
Ichigo waved him off, sitting down and waving Hitoshi to sit with him.
I get it. We've all got it. Pretty rough, but we can't beat ourselves up over it. Izuku's strong and smart and amazing. He'll be fine. Besides, he wouldn't want us to be moping around doing nothing, right?
Hitoshi was silent for a moment before nodding.
You're right. He wouldn't, but what can we do? It feels hopeless.
Well, lucky for you, I have an idea.
Ichigo smiled at him. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow in a silent gesture to continue.
See, I was wandering around and I passed Momo's room. She'd just broken up and I think the police were questioning her. She said that she'd had Avase attach a tracking device to the Nomu that was attacking them.
Hitoshi's eyebrows reached for his hairline. His eyes widened.
Well, what are we waiting for? Shouldn't we go talk to her?
Ichigo shook his head with a sigh.
We need to wait until tomorrow at least. Momo's head wound is still healing. She has a pretty bad concussion too, so until they can get Recovery Girl in tomorrow afternoon, she's not allowed to create anything.
And until then, Hitoshi asked, I know Shoto will want to come. He just needs some time alone right now. You want to bring anyone else?
I'll ask everyone else if they want to come.
Ichigo nodded.
But this all depends on if Momo will make the tracker for us.
She will, and if she doesn't, I'll use my quirk.
Hitoshi glared at the ground.
But she will. I know she will.
I hope you're right, man.
Chapter 69.
Nice.
Mario Kart. Tomura finally came down to the bar after around 2 hours after he was told their hostage had woken up. What? He wanted to beat the boss level in this new game! And then he got sidetracked and completed another 5 levels on top of that. You know how it goes. When he arrived at the bar though, expecting his league to be antagonizing Izuku Midoriya, possibly torturing him, whatever, to be honest, Tomura didn't particularly care, even though he'd rather Midoriya not be hurt too much after the conversation they'd had at the mall. He'd basically given his troops free rein. However, the site he arrived at was completely unexpected. Midoriya was completely untied, and not only that, seemed to have been given a change of clothes from his dirty ones. Apparently Toga had been the one to supply the clothes, since Midoriya was wearing a pink hoodie and skirt, with cycle shorts, thank God. And Tomura wouldn't have thought anyone else would want to wear Toga's skirts, but apparently they were the same size and Midoriya didn't seem to care, so whatever. Kurotigiri stood behind the bar, cleaning glasses as he usually did, though he was keeping an eye on Toga and Midoriya, who sat at the bar talking amicably, both clutching steaming cups of tea in their hands. Compress and Magne were playing Go Fish in a booth, occasionally glancing over at the pair at the bar, while Spinner was engrossed in some racing game on their PS-17 in the corner. The weirdest sight to see, though, was Dabi, who was curled into a ball in the corner of the room with a bottle of vodka cradled between his knees. Which he was routinely gulping mouthfuls from. The man was probably drunk already. Tentatively, Tomura moved a few steps closer to Toga and Midoriya, so he was in hearing range of their conversation. So your quirk relies on blood consumption to turn into people, right? Midoriya asked her. Toga nodded vigorously. And as a side effect you have blood cravings basically all the time? Yep! I love blood! The psycho grinned. It's so pretty, and the people look so beautiful covered in blood. Oh, and different people's blood tastes different too. Like Ochako-chan's blood tastes kinda like mochi. Really? Midoriya looked genuinely curious at the realization, while Tomura was slightly disgusted. I wonder if you could tell me if people were related by taste of their blood. I've never tried! Toga gasped. I wonder if we tried it with Dabi. We're not experimenting on him. He looks traumatized. Midoriya glanced over at Dabi. Did he have something to do with Dabi's current state? Besides, his system's full of alcohol right now. Wait, do you get affected by stuff in the blood you drink? Like, what if you drank blood from a dude with STIs or something? They just really taste yucky. Toga made a face. But I think my quirk doesn't let me catch stuff from other people's blood. Same with drugs. My quirk kinda repels it. Midoriya looked starry-eyed for a second. Your quirk is basically like a self-defense mechanism. I wonder if you got some if we got some of your own blood, maybe you could make a cure for blood-based diseases. Your quirk is so cool. I wish I had my notebooks to write down. I don't know about the cure thing, Himiko shrugged, but I doubt any doctor would want to do it anyways. Most normal people don't like my quirk. Well, then they're idiots. Let me guess, you were called villainous growing up because of your quirk? Toga nodded before grinning. But it's okay now, because I found people who accept me and my villain quirk for who I am. That's good. Midoriya smiled. But regardless, villainous quirks aren't a thing. Neither are heroic ones. I'm a hero student, and even though I'm quirkless, my friend has a mind control quirk. He's trying to be a hero too. I bet I could give you a few ways that all of your quirks could be applied to heroics and do the opposite. Go on then. Tomura interrupted. Give us some examples. Midoriya turned sharply to stare at him, as did everyone else. The hero student took a deep breath before starting to ramble. Okay, well, decay could be used in the rescue work. You could disintegrate rubble or blockages with minimal risk of collapse. I'm not sure how much control you have, but you could easily clear paths and rescue buried civilians. Himiko, your quirk would be amazing for stealth. You could disguise yourself as a member of a villain's gang and gain vital information, and your quirk would be great for detective work too. If there was an unknown blood sample or something, you could drink it and transform into the person to identify them. Compress and Kurogiri's quirks would be amazing to evacuate large amounts of civilians, as well as moving rubble. Kurogiri could probably transport a villain straight into a jail cell if he wanted. There's more, but...
What about the heroes?
Dobby slurred from the corner, propping his head up on the wall.
How they be villains, smartass.
Well, All Might could destroy a city with a single punch, and Endeavor, well, I kinda guess he was a villain. Hawks can assassinate someone from miles away and can simultaneously control hundreds of tiny blades through telepathy. Ryukyu could probably terrorize the population if she wanted to. Sir Night-Eye has torture devices in his agency for when people don't make him laugh, and Etchat...
Wait, back up!
Spinner yelled down his controller. Sir Night-Eye! Like All Might's sidekick. Ex-sidekick he left 6 years ago, but yeah, I read a post about one of the sidekicks who left his agency a while ago, that he has a whole contraptions in his office that he straps his employees to if they don't have enough humor.
Holy fuck, kid!
Magne stared at the hero student. Are you okay? To be honest, probably not. Izuku shrugged. Anyway, Himiko, do you think that regularly drinking blood as a part of your diet would reduce the cravings? Probably. She tilted her head, taking a sip of tea. But I doubt anyone's willing to give me blood to drink. Well, we can at least test it out. I don't mind you drinking some of my blood. Just test it out.
If it works, I bet the doctor would be able to give you a blood supply.
Tomura shrugged, pulling out his switch and moving over to sit down at the table. He stared at the screen for a minute before glancing up at Midoriya and Toga and sighing heavily.
Hey brats, this game's multiplayer. You two noobs want to play?
Tomura asked, glaring at him. Sure! Toga grinned, and Midoriya smiled and nodded. What game is it?
Mario Kart.
Tomura looked away, embarrassed.
Kurogiri, get the other controllers, you two come with me so we can get this shitty game set up.
The teens shut up to follow Tomura into the next room, which happens to be a gaming room with a bigger TV than they could cast to. Midoriya grabbed the beanbag from the corner and dragged it over so it was next to the couch, while Toga threw herself onto the couch and Tomura slumped down next to her. Honestly, he would have rather that Toga had the beanbag, but since Midoriya was technically their hostage, it would have to do. And then after Kurogiri had warped the spare snitch controller into Tomura's lap, he set up the game, and the three players began the competitive tournament of Mario Kart. Midoriya and Toga struggled a little at first, and Tomura was starting to get a little frustrated, until in the middle of their 7th round, Midoriya pulled some shit out of his ass and managed to have his Toad take 1st place and knock Tomura's score out of the park. After a few rounds more, all of which Midoriya won in various ways that made Tomura look like a complete noob, and Toga was worse than that, at least her score made him feel a little better about himself, he slammed down his controller and stared at the boy, who turned to face him with an innocent look on his face.
How the fuck did you just keep doing that?
Tomura screeched, gesturing to the screen with a wide swoop of his arms and nearly whacking Toga in the face. Midoriya glanced around. I just strategize? I spent the first few rounds working out what all the power-ups and things do, and worked out when it would be the best moments to drop or use them to win, and did.
Alright, you're not playing any of this shit anymore!
Tomura glared.
You're too good! We're playing Minecraft. You can't strategize in Minecraft.
Midoriya looked skeptical as Tomura yelled for Kurogiri to bring them an extra PC, but joined in without objection. Toga seemed to be just enjoying the ability to slaughter innocent animals.
Same though, Toga.
Only Minecraft.
I'm sorry, Sensei. I didn't mean to interrupt your rest or cry.
Shoto stammered out, wiping his sleeve across his eye to try and get rid of the remnants of tears.
It's okay to cry, Shoto.
Aizawa sighed, patting his arm in a hopefully reassuring way.
It's much better than bottling up your emotions. And as for interrupting me, I was hoping for something to happen anyway. I don't like hospitals. Now are you all right?
Oh, Shoto sighed. I feel better after that, but I can't believe he's gone, and I couldn't do anything to help. I just sat there, and it's so stupid because I couldn't have done anything. But if I had just done better, then maybe I could have been there to save him. Shoto, listen to me, Aizawa said solemnly. Shoto turned to look right into his eyes. Aizawa seemed sad all of a sudden.
I know the feeling. I know it's way too well. I know how it feels to lose someone you see as close as family, and I understand that what you're going through, but you can't let it hurt you. Don't blame yourself, especially if we do lose him, which I'm positive we won't, because it will only hurt more in the long run. Just remember that Midoriya's still out there. He's smart and brave and strong, and I believe that he's okay. You should go. And you should too.
The room was silent for a minute, while Shoto took in what Aizawa was right. Izuku was strong and brave, and he'd be able to outsmart the villains in an instant. Shoto would have faith that it would turn out okay.
Will the heroes get him back?
Shoto asked, glancing out towards the windows.
Of course they will, and if they don't, I'll crawl out of this bed and get him out myself.
Aizawa cracked a smile, and Shoto smiled back.
Holy fuck! Shoto, you're here! Thank God!
The door flew open with a yell, and Shoto jumped, whipping around to see Hitoshi framed in the door.
I've been looking everywhere for you.
Sorry about earlier. Shoto looked away, suddenly embarrassed. I didn't mean to snap at you.
And I shouldn't have pushed you when you were obviously not ready to talk.
Hitoshi sighed before glancing between Shoto and Aizawa. That sorted you out? Shoto glanced at Aizawa, who rolled his eyes before looking back at Hitoshi and took a deep breath. Yeah, he did. Great, because someone's here to see you. Hitoshi waved for him to follow. Come on, they've already waited long enough. Chapter 70. Family and Friends. Who's here? Shoto asked Hitoshi as they made their way through hallway after hallway. What do they want? You'll see, Hitoshi replied cryptically, increasing his strides so Shoto had to jog to catch up. Can you at least tell me if it's good or bad? Depends. Shoto shrugged as he walked. On what? Shoto pressed. Hitoshi looked back as they rounded the corner to the hospital lobby. You! Oh God, Shoto! Just as he looked in the direction of the new voice, Shoto was engulfed in a tight hug. Inko? Shoto asked, tentatively hugging the woman back. She looked at him with teary eyes. Oh, Shoto, I'm so glad you're okay. I would have come as soon as I heard about what happened to Izuku and the rest of you. She cried, stepping back and holding his arms tight. Shoto couldn't quite come up with words to say. Hitoshi had stepped away and was leaning on a wall nearby. No help at all. I'm sorry I couldn't save your son. This isn't your fault. Goodness, no one but the villains should be to blame. Izuku will be okay. I know he will. Call it a mother's instinct. Inko smiled softly, despite the tears on her cheeks. I know the timing isn't convenient. Inko let go of him and gently led him towards the seats on the other side of the room as she spoke. His eyes widened when he realized who was occupying them. But when I got a call from the UA, I was in the middle of finalizing some things with your mother's doctor. Both of Shoto's siblings were here. Fuyumi was waving enthusiastically to give to him, and so was... Your mother was cleared to be discharged from the hospital an hour ago. She wanted to come straight here once I told her. Rei was sitting with her 2 children, dressed in simple clothes. Her face lit up when their eyes met, and Shoto took a cautious step forward. Before he was swept up in another hug, Fuyumi was holding him for dear life, and his mother followed moments later. Natsuo was only a second behind to wrap all 3 of them into a bear hug. Shoto finally allowed himself to smile properly, surrounded by the family he loved. If only Toya were here, it would be perfect. Dabi had no idea what the fuck he was supposed to do. Currently he was halfway through the bottle of vodka. He was truly, positively drunk and still couldn't get what had happened multiple hours ago out of his head. Somehow they managed to kidnap Ryoku without even fucking realizing it. And not only that, but the brat knew his identity. Now what Shigaraki had told him about the kid saying he was an idiot at the mall made so much more sense, and had said it in front of Toga, the most talkative idiot in the league. Besides twice. Thank God he had told twice. To be honest, this really was Dabi's own fault. He had just been bored one day and had heard that the famous YouTuber Ryoku was planning to take down Endeavor from a vigilante girl who claimed to be one of the brat's admins. He decided, hey, why not DM the guy? Because he thought it would provide some great entertainment and nothing else, which would be fair it had. He had underestimated Ryoku, who, by the way, had just beat the current world record for Minecraft speedruns by 6.2 seconds. Shigaraki was raving about managing to get it on camera, thinking that he wouldn't figure out his identity, even though Dabi had, albeit accidentally, laid out every piece of information for him. In his frustration, Dabi threw the bottle in his hand, only for a misty portal to open in its path and place the bottle neatly on the bar. The villain groaned before standing up and stumbling off in search of his phone. He really shouldn't do anything while he was drunk, as he was, but who fucking cares anyway? Shoto had finally agreed to come home with them. Hitoshi was frankly relieved that Shoto had felt better after his talk with Aizawa, along with seeing his family and Inko. Seeing his friends like he had brought an uncomfortable, twisting feeling to his heart. They'd stayed another half an hour while Shoto, his family, and Inko caught up and discussed arrangements. They decided that Rei would stay with Inko until everything going on was resolved, and she could get money and a job, and until then her children would continue staying where they were. Hisashi had returned, and both Hitoshi and Shoto agreed to head home for the night. Well, morning now, but they were both exhausted and desperately needed sleep. Quickly he texted Ichiro, making sure their friend knew to update them on any plans before heading out of the hospital. Shoto and Tao to collapse in the back of Hisashi's car.
Okay, kid. I know Minecraft is a pretty easy game to play.
Shigaraki leveled him with a look that Izuku couldn't quite tell the meaning of.
And I also know we've been playing it for 2 hours.
Yeah? Izuku glanced around awkwardly as his character soaked up the XP from killing the Ender Dragon.
But 2 hours is not a normal time for a new player to defeat the game.
Shigaraki scowled before straightening his face and speaking awkwardly.
So, I was wondering if you wanted to try speedrunning.
Which is... Izuku raised an eyebrow. Shigaraki groaned, pulling out his phone and typing something in.
Just watch a few of these shitty videos.
So Izuku spent 2 hours watching YouTube videos of people speedrunning Minecraft until he was certain that he could do the same. Sorry. He might not have experienced the game, but he knew the basics and he'd already figured out how it worked, so how hard could it be? Apparently quite hard, especially with the added pressure of Shigaraki filming it for some reason and Himiko etching him on. But after 4 or 5 tries, Izuku managed to speedrun Minecraft. This was an achievement, according to Shigaraki screaming on the floor, and Himiko bouncing around the room.
You beat the fucking world record!
Shigaraki screamed after watching the video he took back.
How the fuck did you beat the world record?
There's a world record? Izuku squeaked. Was that why you were filming?
Yep.
Himiko grinned. You're super cool, Izuku. I can't believe you're even better than Shiggy. He's been trying to beat that for ages.
Shut up or I'll disintegrate you, Toga!
Tomura threatened as he lay sprawled out on the beanbag holding his phone up to his face.
We should post this.
Where though? Himiko tilted her head, leaning over Shigaraki. I have a YouTube channel, Izuku suggested. If you send it to Dabi, he can send it to me.
Why the fuck does Patchwork have your number?
Shigaraki put the phone down and stared at him. Izuku shrugged. We talked on the internet. Himiko grinned at him and Izuku subtly tilted his head and she giggled, making a motion as though she was zipping her lips shut just out of Shigaraki's line of sight.
Okay, sure, whatever, crazies!
Shigaraki stood up.
We'll deal with that shit in the morning, Brett. You can sleep in a booth or some shit, whatever, I don't care.
Sure! Izuku grinned.
Thanks, Shigaraki!
Hey, Izuku? Himiko's voice made Izuku crack open an eyelid. She had taken the couch opposite of the one he had claimed to watch over him. Yes, Himiko? Izuku mumbled, just loud enough for her to hear. He turned his head to see that she was looking at him with a strange look on her face, her eyes glowing a little in the dim light of the bar. Today was really fun. She flopped onto her back with a sigh. I'm not sure what it is, but after everything today, I was just wondering if this is what I really want to do, you know?
You mean being a villain?
Izuku asked, confused. Yeah, well, when we talked earlier and you said that all of that stuff about my quirk and how it doesn't make me a villain, and then we played all those games together with Shiggy, it almost felt normal. Like I was just any other teenager spending time playing games with her friends. She sighed again. I love my life now, but sometimes I just find myself wondering if things had been different, if I was born with a better quirk, then maybe I could be normal. And it took Izuku a moment too long to realize that she was crying, and scramble off his bench and feel his way over to hers. When he sat down next to her, she pulled herself up and leaned against him.
It's alright to want to be normal.
Izuku zoned out as he spoke, staring off into nothing.
I spent my life wishing I had a quirk, that I was like everyone else, to be honest. Today was a nice break. Being a hero is great and all, but it does get stressful sometimes, and being quirkless is something I've always struggled with. People tend to categorize others based on quirks, and, well, you know how that is.
Yeah, Himiko sniffed into his shoulder.
But your quirks doesn't determine what you should be. Don't listen to what people tell you. Don't just be a hero if people tell you your quirk is made for it, and don't be a villain for the same reason.
Izuku said with a sigh.
If I had listened to the people in middle school, I wouldn't be a hero student right now. No chance. And hey, if people around you had supported you and helped you with your quirk instead of pushing you away and calling you a villain, then maybe you wouldn't be here either.
I've always wanted to be
I've always wanted to be a hero since as long as I can remember. It took a lot of encouragement from a few of my friends to realize that maybe I could be.
Izuku looked down at Himiko.
Did you ever had a dream like that? Something you always wanted to be?
Silence fell over them for a minute while Himiko thought about it. Izuku's question made sense. The silence was broken when she took a deep breath and started speaking slowly, a huge difference from her earlier excitable tone. I used to want to build things, she said. I always loved taking things apart and seeing how they worked. Before my quirk came in, my parents encouraged me, saying I'd be a great inventor one day. I gave up on that idea when I left, but, well, I can't really do that anymore.
I'm sure you could.
Izuku smiled.
Netsu, UA's principal, has a thing about underdogs and strays. I'm sure he'd be happy to help you out if you asked.
But UA's full of heroes! Wouldn't I just be arrested at the gates? They know I was at the attack! Himiko sounded a little dejected. And there's always that thing about Boss's sensei.
Shigaraki's sensei?
Izuku asked. He'd heard about this guy before, and all that research he'd done. Maybe Himiko could confirm it, and then he could try and talk to Shigaraki if he was right.
Who's that?
He's the creepy dude who just talks through a TV in the corner and tells Tomu-chan what to do. Himiko pointed to the corner. He's kind of controlling and super powerful, and I don't think he'd like it if I went to the heroes. Well, maybe we should sleep. For now, I'll talk to Shigaraki in the morning, Izuku said with a sigh, moving to get up only for his shoulders to be grabbed. Stay here? Himiko asked with wide eyes, and Izuku sighed but sat back down. As long as you promise not to stab me in my sleep, Izuku told her firmly. She grinned and nodded. Okie dokie! She grinned before settling down to sleep.